It seems that one can't listen to or watch the news these days without hearing something about vaccine passports. This is really one of the stories of our lifetimes, and as a lawyer, I can't not talk about it. So today on Don't Talk TV, I'm going to take a look at the legal and charter implications of vaccine passports. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. Now, as I said in the preamble, vaccine passports are a hot topic in the media. It's all over the place. Every time I look at my newsfeed, there's at least one article talking about vaccine passports. As of the creation of this video, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has ruled out a national vaccine passport, and here in Ontario, Premier Doug Ford has likewise indicated that he will not be implementing a vaccine passport because he doesn't want a, quote, divided society, unquote. However, a number of other countries have implemented it, including France, United Kingdom. Australia hasn't ruled it out, and I frankly wouldn't be surprised if a country that's put soldiers on the streets to keep people in their homes and locked down entire apartment complexes would implement something like that. The province of Manitoba has implemented a vaccine passport, and as I mentioned in my 50th episode, of all places, the Museum of Human Rights in Winnipeg, Manitoba, has themselves implemented a policy where only holders of a vaccine passport are allowed onto their premises, which, as I quoted, is the height of irony in my view. Maybe the Museum of Human Rights has become a place that commemorates human rights that used to exist and don't exist anymore. As my comments have no doubt telegraphed to you, in my view, vaccine passports are extremely problematic for a number of reasons. So I'm going to look at that. And there's two main areas that I think these vaccines are problematic. One is the issue of consent, and specifically consent to medical treatment. And two are the charter implications and human rights implications. So I think as a starting point, I want to establish that consent to medical treatment is a thing in Canadian law. Medical treatment is an assault if it is not done with not only the consent, but the informed consent of a patient. I'm going to start by going all the way back to 1945, the Supreme Court decision of Parmley and Parmley. The key quotation from this decision starts at page 645, and the Supreme Court there said, quote, "The conclusion appears unavoidable that both of the parties hereto, particularly in the operating room, failed to recognize the right of a patient when consulting a professional man in the practice of his profession to have an examination, a diagnosis, advice, and consultations, and that thereafter it is for the patient to determine what, if any, operation or treatment shall be proceeded with." They went on to say that it may be that in the operating room the parties hereto were of the opinion that they were acting in the best interests of Mrs. Ewell in extracting the teeth, but that is not the point. And here's the point. As was said by Garrison J., no amount of professional skill can justify the substitution of the will of the surgeon for that of his patient. This was reiterated in another Supreme Court of Canada decision, Hopp and Lepp, a 1980 decision of the Supreme Court. And in speaking about the term informed consent, they noted that at that time was a term frequently used in American cases, and it, quote, "reflects the fact that although there is generally prior consent by a patient to propose surgery or therapy, this does not immunize the surgeon or physician from liability for battery or for negligence if he has failed in a duty to disclose the risks of the surgery or treatment known or should be known to him and which are unknown to the patient. The underlying principle is the right of a patient to decide what, if anything, should be done with his body." I mean, this is really the enunciation of the my body, my choice principle. And it states, "It follows, therefore, that a patient's consent, whether to surgery or to therapy, will give protection to his surgeon or physician only if the patient has been sufficiently informed to enable him to make a choice whether or not to submit to the surgery or therapy." So it's absolutely clear that in Canadian law, a patient must consent to any medical treatment, otherwise it's a form of battery, otherwise known as an assault. And an assault is any application of force on an individual without their consent. Now in the case of vaccine passports, I don't think we even get to the level of informed consent we need to look at, is there consent, period? And to consider what is consent, let's look at Her Majesty the Queen in Ewanchuk, a 1999 decision of the Supreme Court of Canada. Now, this was a sexual assault case, but it lays out crystal clear what's required for consent. Paragraph 28 states that the rationale underlying the criminalization of assault explains this. Society is committed to protecting the personal integrity, both physical and psychological, of every individual. Having control over who touches one's body and how lies at the core of human dignity and autonomy. It goes on to say that the common law has recognized for centuries that the individual's right to physical integrity is a fundamental principle. Quote, every man's person being sacred and no other having a right to meddle with it in any the slightest manner. It follows that any intentional but unwanted touching is criminal. What we really need to consider, though, is it truly consent to receive a vaccine in a context where you're not going to be allowed to travel, you're not allowed to go to a store, you're not allowed to go to a cafe unless you get that vaccine? For that, we look at how coercion or pressure from authority figures influences consent. So moving down to paragraph 36 of Ewanchuk, the Supreme Court said, to be legally effective, consent must be freely given. Therefore, even if the complainant consented or her conduct raises a reasonable doubt about her non-consent, circumstances may arise which call into question what factors prompted her apparent consent. The Criminal Code defines a series of conditions under which the law will deem an absence of consent in cases of assault, notwithstanding the complainant's ostensible or apparent consent or participation. So this goes directly to vaccination. If they're saying, well, we didn't take you at gunpoint to the vaccination center, but if you went because of fear that you'd lose your job, for example, if you're a hockey player and you've been drafted into the OHL, and in order to play, you need to have the vaccine, that's the type of situation they're talking about here. So these are enumerated in section 253 sub 3, and they include submission by reason of force, fear, threats, fraud, or the exercise of authority, and codifying the long-standing common law rule that consent given under fear or duress is ineffective. Let me say that again. Consent given under fear or duress is ineffective. Consent given under fear or duress is not consent. And if we just look here, section 265 is quoted. For the purposes of this section, no consent is obtained where the complainant submits or does not resist by reason of A, the application of force to the complainant or to a person other than the complainant. B, threats or fear of the application of force to the complainant or to a person other than the complainant. C, fraud, or D, the exercise of authority. The implementation of a vaccine passport is absolutely the exercise of authority. And if a person receives a vaccine only because of that use of authority and because they want to be able to live a normal life, they did not consent to that medical treatment. And in my view, that is a clear assault. And it's assault that any physician is a party to that takes part in. The Hippocratic Oath requires that physicians do no harm. Assault is harm. So a vaccine passport is absolutely offensive to a free and democratic society, and it is entirely injurious to the sanctity of the individual's person, guaranteed under Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And the case law makes clear it's an assault. But there's also a human rights and charter aspect. Section 15 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees that every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. Medical choice is not listed, but I note that that is not an exhaustive list. Section 15 merely says in particular, and in my view, denying people freedom of movement, guaranteed under Section 6 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, giving that only to some and not to others is a clear violation of Section 15. Allowing some people to go to a movie and others to not go to a movie is a clear violation of Section 15. And the concept of a vaccine passport bears extremely disturbing familiarity to other passports that we've seen in the past in order to engage in certain activities in society. Specifically, I would compare a vaccine passport to the Ahnen-Pass or the Ancestor Pass implemented in Nazi Germany in the 1930s that allowed only, quote, racially pure, unquote, individuals to hold certain positions, to go to certain places, to travel freely. It also has disturbing similarity to apartheid in South Africa or the Jim Crow laws in the southern United States before the Civil Rights Movement, where there was a water fountain for colored people and a water fountain for white people. In regards to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms And human rights, in my view, a vaccine passport is absolutely inimical to that as well. And I agree 100% with Doug Ford when he says that that would create a divided society, and he doesn't want a divided society. A divided society is not one of the principles that Canada was founded upon. To the contrary, Canada is founded on the opposite of a divided society. So therefore, I felt the need to speak out on this unequivocally as a lawyer, and this is something that must be fought anywhere that it's implemented. As I say, fortunately, it's not in Ontario yet, but it is already in Manitoba. And the media, with the amount of coverage they're giving it, in my respectful view, seem to be really pushing this and trying to encourage our governments to implement this sort of apartheid system in Canada. And I don't use that term lightly, but I also don't think that it's hyperbolic to use that term. As I said in episode 50, apartheid literally means aparthood, or apartness, or separateness. That's exactly what a vaccine passport system is. It's one system for the vaccinated and one system for the unvaccinated. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not making any commentary on the medical efficacy or desirability of vaccines. All I'm commenting on is the legal implications and the societal implications, and it's up to the individual viewer whether they want to get that vaccine or not. But that choice must be free for the reasons I've already shown. In law, that choice must be a free one, and a vaccine passport renders it a non-voluntary choice. This video is not legal advice. If you have a situation where you need legal advice, please call a lawyer. You can call myself or another lawyer. My 1-855 number and my website are listed below. And if you have any ideas of shows that you'd like to see me cover, please send me an email. My email address for Don't Talk TV is listed below, or you can leave a comment in the comment section below. And if you found this video at all interesting, informative, or helpful, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, and following me on social media.